If there's one producer whose style has had the most influence on an entire generation, it might be Timbaland. Even your favorite producer agrees.
No. Have y'all heard?
But what many people fail to understand is just how innovative Timbaland's beatmaking techniques actually are. But what are these techniques? What does Timbaland do with his beats that make them so distinct? Today we're going to uncover this by analyzing his beats and breaking down 3 ideas that he uses in his production that you can use to improve your own beats as well. But if you could do me a favor and hit like or subscribe, it really does help my channel out and I would love you forever. Thank you so much. So let's start off with number 1. Timbaland's early breakthrough happened when he produced for Aaliyah and Genuine, and it was here he first started making a name for himself. And one of the beats that helped him do this was Are You That Somebody?
Don't you know, gotta tell somebody.
Now this might seem like a simple beat at first, but once you break down how this beat was made, you'll start to see how complex Timbaland's production actually is. Starting off, take a listen to the sample that he uses for this beat. As you can hear, the melody is completely different. It's not as if Timbaland simply just took the sample and looped it like this. Yeah, that's not what's happening in this beat. Timbaland just did so much more, and this is the first technique that he often used in his beats, which is repitching the sample. So here's how Timbaland made the loop for his beat. First, he isolated just a single note from the sample, and he mapped it across the keyboard. And this allowed him to create his own musical pattern. And this is why repitching is such a powerful technique. And this is why I often recommend using more minimal samples as you get more and more experienced. It allows you to do complex techniques just like this. So here is the pattern that Timbaland came up with using just this one simple note from the sample. And as you can see, this is a pretty complex pattern. Lots of notes with different pockets of rhythms, which is part of what Timbaland's also known for. But this beat gets even more insane. If we compare our loop to what Timbaland came up with, it sounds different than what we have so far. And that's because Timbaland layered yet another chop from the same sample and created an even more complex pattern with it. So here's the second piece of the puzzle, the second chop that Timbaland uses. And again, he uses the same repitching technique to map this across the keyboard. Then he creates a second pattern using the sound that sits on top of the first one that we just built. So here, not only is Timbaland using a technique that very few producers were doing at the time, like repitching, he does it using multiple pieces of a sample while stacking them on top of each other. This is a level of sampling that you just don't hear often, even today. Most producers are just happy looping a sample, but as you can see, Timbaland pushes his samples further, not to mention his unique drum patterns as well. When we break down this drum pattern, you can start to see some interesting ideas in here as well. For example, instead of having a snare on the usual spot on the 4th beat, he places multiple snares around it. And you can hear he pans them around, which is also unusual. Later on in the drum loop, we have this one kick that has a completely different timing as well. You can see it's nowhere near being close on the standard grid. And this is what I mean. Even though this beat might seem simple sounding, it's just a guitar and a drum loop on the surface, the amount of distinct techniques and ideas within the details is what makes his beats stand out. Now, as Timbaland and Aaliyah continue to work together, Timbaland's production continued to evolve, and we can hear this on More Than a Woman. Now, when you listen to the sample for this beat, you might notice something interesting. Timbaland doesn't use the full sample for his beat. Take a listen to the sample compared to what Timbaland did with it. The sample is huge and orchestral, which might not result in the most balanced sounding beat, and this is exactly why Timbaland makes some smart production choices. Now, one simple and quick difference is that the sample was put closer into a mono space. This helped it not sound as large, but what's more important is what you can hear in the first half bar. Timbaland swaps out the sample for his own guitar pattern, and it's this guitar that's used throughout the entire beat. Now, the reason why this is a good production choice is because the guitar is a much more small and flexible sound. This is what helps Timbaland create an entire beat that doesn't sound so overwhelmingly full compared to if you just use the sample. And when we break down the guitar pattern, it's playing the same melody, the same musical idea as the sample, which is what helps it integrate with the sample as it comes in and out throughout the beat. So here we can start to see Timbaland's evolution, where he starts blending his own sounds and instruments alongside samples rather than just relying on samples alone. But by the way, if you struggle with your own beats, I want to recommend Better Beatmaker, my online beatmaking program. It helps break down beatmaking in a way that makes it easy to understand. If you feel like watching YouTube is just too technical, come see why my members say they got more out of 5 minutes with Better Beatmaker than watching hours of YouTube. Now back to the beats. Later on in his career, you can continue to see Timbaland start to move away from samples even more. And this might be because of the legal problems that using samples caused him, but even though he walked away from sampling as time went on, one of the most insane uses of a sample in a beat came later on in his career in his 2007 song, Bounce. Now what makes this beat so amazing is the actual samples that Timbaland used. So far we've seen him sample a funk song and an Egyptian song. There are plenty of genres he's explored throughout his career. But take a listen to the samples that Timbaland uses for Bounce. Here's sample number 1. And here's sample number 2. Most producers look for samples that are full of amazing sounding instruments to use, but here, Timbaland uses a sample of a bass tone and another sample of a woman just laughing. And this is what makes this beat so insane to me. So let's take a look at how this beat was put together. First, we have the bass. This is pitched down one semitone and chopped partway through the actual note. This provides a thick, full sounding foundation for the beat to be built upon. And when we look at the weird vocal sample, here are the pieces that are used. Now on the surface, this might seem like a random sample to use, but you can hear that there's actually musicality to this part of the sample. If we take a synth, we can roughly trace out the melodic idea, and it actually has logic to it. It's not just a series of random sounds, and so when we finally add drums into this beat, which I just took from the actual song, we have a full sounding beat that actually sounds good, but also makes sense. Throughout all these beats so far, we've just seen how many diverse and unique approaches Timbaland has to making beats. Now, if you're a big fan of Timbaland, by the way, I recommend checking out the video next to me. In it, I break down even more production ideas from the man himself. But if you enjoyed this video, think about hitting like and subscribe, and yeah, check that video out. Just click it. Come on, click it.